Hello, welcome back to the DeepOnes podcast. This is episode 2, and I'm joined by Mr.Turtle as always.
Sup?
And in today's episode, the first topic we'll be talking about is the dungeons and how they'll affect gameplay in DeepOken. So to start off this topic, I think we could talk about the potential puzzles that could exist within the dungeons. So, do you have any comment on that?
Well, excuse me. So I've been thinking that good puzzles for the dungeon itself would be that because the world of DeepOken is presented as it's mainly run down, and that all the ruins were created by somewhat an ancient civilization. So, thinking that they weren't as advanced as us, I think that the main source of puzzles will be either pattern repeating. So for example, we'll have to have like a puzzle, and then we'll have to move the pieces around in certain order to create a certain picture, and also mazes.
Yeah, those are pretty stereotypical puzzles. One idea that
They
I
are
had...
pretty stereotypical, but like if you think about it, that would fit the world from what we've seen, because we've
Yeah, it
seen
would.
like all those like great buildings like fallen apart, and we could also have like just empty rooms here with like no like really purpose, but the puzzle will be that we have to find a hidden switch.
So
And then it will open like a whole different continuation.
Yeah. So one thing that I was thinking is much more like lore-related puzzles. Like imagine a puzzle that like asks you, which is like a poem of sorts, that it asks you to like complete this poem, and you'd have to complete it based on your knowledge of like the DeepOken lore.
I see.
So that
Another
would
thing
encourage
could be-
exploration even more throughout the game, and it wouldn't just be like a stereotypical puzzle. It would be an interesting puzzle in its own right, and it would be a test of your knowledge of the lore. Because as the devs have said, they want the lore to be more important in DeepOken and much more better communicated. Because that was, they said, one of their biggest regrets with Rogue Lineage.
Well, yeah, in Rogue, the only way to really know the lore is to speak to every single NPC in K and Gaia, and then you would have to read up on some documents which weren't that widely spread. And
Yeah.
most like playbase didn't even know it existed.
Yeah, majority of
But
that...
I also think that...
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that
Yeah,
all of that
yeah.
lore is actually fan-interpreted. Like, part of it was, and then the devs just said, like, okay, this is pretty much mostly accurate in canon.
Yeah, another thing I would want to see is like possibly that at the end of a dungeon there would be like a giant door with like a, I don't know, a code or passcode. The only way you could like fucking get into the final room is if you went through every single room in the maze or whatever and found these specific combinations which would allow you, to open the door. Which would also like not allow people to really speedrun it. But I also think that it should like add additional challenge, because if like I've been thinking that they should make the dungeons randomized every time someone enters, so like certain rooms will be there, certain won't be there, so that not only would it make players not able to like bot them, because the thing won't be like able to script it or whatever to like do the puzzles over and over again, but it also like make the players think and make them explore every room for possible more treasures, because I think when there is dungeons, I don't think there should be treasures.
There should always be there should always be alternative paths in dungeons that like lead to greater loot, I feel.
Yeah, like for example, if there's like you go, like even if you don't go into the last room with all the loot and everything, it still should be like a few different small chests around the dungeon which just give you like some small loot, some money which you could just spend, so it would be worth, even if you're not a high level, you could still like not high enough level to like go through the dungeon. Because I think as you go deeper and deeper into the dungeon should get harder and harder. So it would actually also allow like starter players to enter a dungeon and get themselves like a quick boost of money, and then get out for like whatever reason.
Yeah. It could encourage like it would benefit players who know like certain things about the game, like they know how to solve certain puzzles easier. Like they'd still have to do them, but they'd know like the method for solving them. So they would end up saving at least some time while doing it, right? So, and then it would also encourage players for like knowing that dungeons are profitable and like the type of loot that they can get from dungeons and stuff. So yeah, it could very well help with like people that are experienced getting builds and stuff faster.
Yeah, I agree with that. So continuing, another thing that we want to see in the dungeons is not only puzzles but also some challenge rooms. Basically, where there would be like enemies spawning in, but they wouldn't be like normal like wave coming at you or something like that. I would want to see some variations like in the enemies, like special dungeon enemies. So, for example, there would be a room in the dungeon in which you must kill enemies in certain order for the door to open. And if you fail it, if you kill different enemy from the one you're supposed to kill first, the whole room would reset. However, you would not gain your health back, so you would be like punished for just doing it wrong. But I think this like type of like challenge should be like near the end of the dungeon, because this could like really screw you over and just make it really unfair. And I also think that it shouldn't really use like higher level monsters. Use some like lower levels, like I don't know, like some wolves or something, which you can kill easily, but that wouldn't do a lot of damage to you.
Yeah, well, they did mention that the devs did mention at some point that they're very proud of the enemy variety in DeepOnes, so potentially like dungeon exclusive mobs could be a thing.
That would be cool if, let's say, there was also like different. Let's say if a dungeon was in a freezing area, yeah, or it's like the dungeon would also have like mainly like frozen enemies, which would like. Okay, so if a dungeon was in a frozen area, and the enemies inside would be frozen, I think that would like benefit players under the fact that players would know what gear they should come with. So if the enemies inside will be using the ice magic, which we have been shown before, then a player could equip gear which is highly resistant against ice magic, which gives them like the ability to just prepare themselves properly instead of going dark in and then exploring it for themselves. And it also like kinda help new players, because it wouldn't like help them really, but it will like give them idea if you want to go into this dungeon, so you wouldn't be completely annihilated. You just bring some ice protective gear.
Yeah, this could be like good for newer players, but also like sort of reward experienced players, because like I assume that like if a dungeon is in like in a specific theme, and it tends to be harder because of the specific theme. So like if you're in an ice dungeon, it's probably going to be harder than like a typical dungeon. And if you're if you're not that good at the game and you'd buy like ice resistant armor and stuff, that could like make the dungeon a bit easier for you if you're a new player. But if you're an experienced player, you can save your money and just keep your current gear for that time being, and clear out the dungeon without having to like get any extra gear on your side. So this could like reward. So this could be a fun challenge that people would have to prepare for people who aren't as experienced, and then it could also be a good thing for people that are experienced, because it's a good amount of loot for the slightly extra challenge of like not going in with those specific preparations.
Plus, it would also punish like inexperience and force them to learn. So it would be like kinda win for both sides and at the same time loss for both sides.
Yeah, and it would also reward like even if a player like is new, if they're good enough, they'll still be able to like survive at least somewhat.
Yeah, and
so it would reward skill.
As we mentioned before, like you don't have to get to the end of the dungeon to gain some reward. Like the further you go into the dungeon, the better loot you'll of course get. At the start, you'll just gain, let's say, a very common item, let's say just a great sword or whatever. But when you go deeper and deeper, you may start finding some rare loot, like the I don't know what, we don't really know what rare loot is in the game, but it's some highly enchanted sword which can one-hit zombie enemies or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, and continuing about the dungeon topic and how there would be different enemies, I think that sometimes in certain dungeons, like a high-level dungeon, for example, at the end, instead of there being a puzzle which locks the last room, there should be a enemy or a dungeon boss which you have to defeat to enter the last room. And I think to like make that would allow players to solo, because I think there would be a lot of soloing players. Like myself personally, I do enjoy playing myself like solo. I think that the difficulty of the boss should change depending on how many players enter the dungeon.
Yeah, so like
So
if there's
if the-
many players, then the boss would have like more health, slightly more damage, and stuff like that.
More damage, or it could be a completely different boss.
Yeah, that could be the case too.
So,
Like,
for example, if there was only one person going into it, for example, there would be a weak version of the crab boss. But if there was like, let's say, 4 people maximum, 5 people maximum per dungeon, then there could be like a big golem boss which has 10k health and would like fucking annihilate you if you blink at him the wrong way.
yeah. So like, better, stronger enemy types if there's more players in there, which would make sense because like
Basically.
you're balancing out like the more players, more like you gotta obviously make it harder if there's more players because you can potentially like more than double damage output if you get more than one player.
Yeah. Plus it was like
Especially since like you can get like specialized players that have like specialized things. So for example, you can get like somebody who has wind magic to like move around the boss, like knock it back and stuff if they're in danger.
Back because
And then like another
we've
guy
been
with
told-
fire to like set the status effect and like cause heavy damage.
and ice, as we've been shown, it's more of a control area controlling one, so it could just use ice to block off a certain area and probably like, I don't know, glitch boss or something.
Yeah. So yeah, that
Like,
could be
it
like
would-
an interesting mechanic, but like all of this just sounds like really interesting to PvP with, PvE with. I mean, like generally player parties focusing on like different
Yeah.
builds could be very interesting for PvE. I feel.
Sure. I mean, another thing would be that it would just wouldn't it benefit people who play with multiple people? Because yes, it would make it fun, but at the same time, it would make give the additional, it still would keep up the challenge and not where if there's
Yeah. You'd
5
have
people
to
going
like,
at it.
you'd have to get the players to like cooperate and work together if they want to
Yeah.
like be able to beat the boss.
But let's say if it was one person, in my opinion, it should scale properly to it. So if there was 5 people, going at the dungeon, they wouldn't be tremendously overpowered. It should still be balanced to the amount of players.
Yeah.
So it would make it more challenging, but at the same time it would still keep it fun. Because in my opinion, all the dungeons should be challenging, but not to the point where they're if you do one wrong step, you would just die for no apparent reason. At that point, it's just unfun. So it should be
Yeah.
this fair balance of challenge and then enjoy, being able to enjoy it. Speaking about that, actually, I would enjoy to see some trap rooms where they wouldn't be super punishing, but if you enter the room, and you saw a chest, you open the chest, it would be either a mimic or a wave of enemy would spawn behind you, a bunch of ranger enemies would just spawn behind you, starting shooting at you out of nowhere.
Okay, actually, I have an idea about to add on to that. So, what if there was an indication that a chest was going to be a mimic or a trap? Especially mimics, it's pretty easy to do indications. So that it rewards experienced players even more.
For example, it wouldn't be also have to be enemies. For example, if you open a chest, the spikes would come out,
Yeah.
from the ground and would damage a player. So I think, for example, for traps like this, it should have a somewhat visible holes in the ground, but they shouldn't be also very visible.
Yeah, or for a
So
mimic, it
it's
could be the chest or slightly opening to breathe or something. I know that's stereotypical, but
Something like that.
it could. It's stereotypical because it works.
It does work because it does benefit players who are experienced enough to see that it is a mimic, so they could, let's say, attack it and then just gain some of the loot back. That could be if they actually made a mimic enemy, which when you kill you would gain some loot. That would give additional I don't know how to say it, challenge as well, in my opinion, because it would give like player the option to attack it, gain the loot, or just leave it alone and knowing they will probably lose some loot.
Yeah.
Because if you're experienced enough to like notice it's a mimic and won't get tripped by it, like it would just give you that option that some people may not have.
Yeah, it's like an optional challenge for a higher reward.
Yes. And then if there was mimic in the game, I should think that if you open the chest without attacking it first, like I think there should be some punishment for not noticing, kind of like how in Dark Souls, you know how a mimic
eats you, like grabs you, bites you if you don't.
I think there should be something similar to that. It like, I don't know, bites your arm or whatever, dealing some damage to you. And then just starts chasing after you.
Yeah.
And then, what I was gonna say. Another like version of a trap we could see wouldn't be specifically like ones which would damage you instantly, but could damage you. So for example, there would be like a trap where your room would start filling up with sand, and the only way to do it is have a person with a gun. Like in the recent leaks, we've been shown that there's like flintlock pistols. So I think like if you had a person with a gun or a ranged ability. Yeah, I think it should be a range ability over a gun because, like, I don't see everyone carrying a gun. That could be a possibility. But if they shoot a certain spot in the wall, yeah, to just release all the sand.
Oh yeah.
So
so these would be like slowly killing you.
Slowly
rooms,
raise until you suffocate.
Yeah, until like poison gas or something like that.
Yeah. And like the way, for example, to discover that would be to see like holes on the roof, and the way for the sun to go through. It shouldn't be like, I don't know. It could be like just something simple, like a small hole in the roof cracks, whatever. Just something to let players, like experienced players, to know what to look out for.
Yeah, or it could be like sand grains, like small grains of sand on the floor.
Yeah, like small patches of sand here and there. One last thing I would want to see in a dungeon, though, is how certain traps are stylized in which environment they are. So, for example, if there's in an icy biome, one of the traps could be that a icicle is falling on your head. However, if we were more of a forest type of area, we could have a spike trap just coming out of your a spike trap coming out of the floor. As well as depending on the difficulty of a dungeon, or depending on the grades, because I suspect some dungeons would be more worth going and some dungeons would be late game. Some traps should be harder to dodge, because in my opinion all traps should be avoidable to a certain degree. If you know how to dodge, avoid them. It shouldn't be a cheesy way, but it should be implemented into the dungeon from the beginning, in my opinion. There should be a way for you to just not get damaged, because you know that the trap is there and you know how to avoid it.
Yeah.
So I think the higher grade of a dungeon would be, the harder for you to dodge it would be.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, it makes
sense.
Depending
on yeah, it also should do more damage, because the high gear you would probably have at the end.
Yeah. But probably to not as much of an extent as most things, because in DeepOken it's very build oriented, right? So if you have a low health build, you still shouldn't be able to take too much damage from traps.
Yeah, it wouldn't be something horrendous way to
yeah, there should still be some sort of scaling to damage in the traps, but not immense amounts.
It should be scaling to damage, yeah, because high damage, but it shouldn't be so overpowered that if your character have no power whatsoever in the health skill, I forgot what it's called, then it should kill you. It probably could deal half of your health back, but it shouldn't kill you, because that would just be unfair.
You know what else I just thought about? So I just remembered one of the traps that exist in Don't Starve, which is sometimes in Don't Starve you'll find a chest that's just sitting there in the wild, and in Don't Starve you don't really find chests often. You'll never be finding chests just in the wild. But the very few times you do, they're usually trapped. And one of the traps that you can find in them is a rot trap. So when you open up the chest, this huge cloud of rot just comes out of it, and any item, like any food that you have in your inventory, starts like goes like it's basically like already rotten. So what I think
that
like
could work.
yeah, so what it could do is like maybe there's like a trap or something that like either like gets you like a gas like makes you like vomit, so like you lose your stomach and thirst, or like
Yeah, that could
something that like
work. Or,
rots your
like,
food or like ruins
yeah, and
potions or
like the way
something.
to like let's say discover it would be let's say there would be like this like greenish mist you could see in the room, like green particles or something like that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be like very obvious, but it should like let's say from the cracks there would be like few green particles just coming off.
Mm-hmm.
It could actually very much work because let's say if your character had a flaw of being a vegetarian, like it would be very hard for I suspect it would be very hard for them to find a food within the dungeon.
Yeah.
Because I mean, in my opinion, like the enemies from the dungeon should have like a chance of dropping stuff. Let's say if they drop money, or like if I don't know, a slime enemy was in a dungeon, it should be able to drop the slime. It shouldn't be like, oh yeah, it's dungeon magic. They don't drop anything. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, some games do
in my
that.
opinion. It just doesn't make sense. Like, why would the two? It should still drop it. So let's say if they had a vegetarian, yeah, it would be harder for them.
Yeah.
Because they just couldn't eat meat. And let's say if an enemy A just dropped meat, then it would be like really screwed for them, so they would have to like back out. Like in my opinion, like every dungeon, yeah, should like in DeepOnes should have the option to, if you like feel like you're too endangered, you should have an option to just go back and just I don't know, once you exit a dungeon, the dungeon like automatically closes and resets. And then it's on a cooldown for let's say 20 minutes or however long.
Yeah.
So if you exit it, as soon as you exit it, the game should realize, oh yeah, the guy is exit, and then just like close.
Yeah, that could be a way to prevent like.
Yeah, that would prevent like cheesing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Also, as a small like thing that I want to add, the Windwalker talent that we've seen in the Crab Leak, I feel personally like that could be linked to the double jump that we see Faceless Man Ruin and Nano Prodigy do in their videos. It's just a complete speculation, but like, I mean, Windwalker, wind double jump, you know, could work. Okay, so like, what could we do for an outro?